Well, thank you, Mr. Gates, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here as well. I'm also proud to be a co-sponsor of the PRIME Act. Wyoming is one of the 29 states currently operating a state inspection program known as the Meat and Poultry Inspection Program, and under current law, as has been repeated here several times, the meat processed at the state inspected plants can only be sold intrastate. Now, as a product of my family ranch outside of Fort Laramie, Wyoming, and having dozens of family members who are in the livestock business, I can assure everyone here and the American public that every farmer and rancher and every meat processing facility has every incentive to protect our meat supply and ensure the safe handling of our food. One of the other reasons that we are here today is to rebut some of the misguided arguments pertaining to this bill, and arguments which are mainly coming from the large corporations and packers who have essentially a monopoly when it comes to meat pricing and packing. Mr. Trotter, if the PRIME Act became law, do you believe that farmers and ranchers would abandon the existing supply chains whereby they sell to the feedlots, which then serve the existing meat processors and packers, or would they continue to use the same process that they use now?
I think you'd see an expansion. You'd have a lot of the big feedlots have their purpose. These large industries do have their purpose, but what you have here is an opportunity for small businesses to expand. This would just be a result in net economic growth here. The large processors do have their place, but when it comes to local businesses, like within your own state, making sure that they have products, from the farm down the road that didn't need to be trucked 300 miles away to get processed at a USDA facility. There is a market for that. It's simply an expansion of everything else. You're not going to see the big four necessarily go away, but you are going to see competition around the edges, and you're going to see the biggest benefit for the smaller producers.
Well, so I think it's fair to say then that the PRIME Act merely gives farmers and ranchers more options when it comes to selling their cattle, and these increased options in turn provide increased benefits to the producers and stave off vertical integration, as well as allowing these producers to determine their own destiny rather than being at the mercy of the packers. We contacted some of the producers in the state of Wyoming and asked them to weigh in on some of the challenges that they have related to producing food, producing our beef and pork, chicken, etc. One of the things that I thought was interesting was a comment from one of my constituents who said that our industry is crippled by the endless regulations coming from the EPA, FDA, and USDA. We spend countless dollars and hours tracking, documenting, and proving things that we do as a regular part of our operation. We have to pay experts to file reports because the regulations are so complicated to follow. A few examples of our struggles include VFD rules, CAFO nutrient management regulations, cattle tagging rules, and animal feeding operations and registrations. The other challenges that they talked about is that there is the industry monopoly that has been discussed several times today. And then the other thing is the unwillingness of the packers to work with our cattle producers, our livestock producers, to actually address the price. We also have to be concerned about continued vertical integration. And these are all challenges that our small businesses, our farmers and ranchers, really the backbone of so many of our communities are facing with overregulation. I want to thank all of you for being here today, for sharing your stories, for discussing the importance of the PRIME Act, and for coming to Congress to find ways that we can fix the problems that your industries are suffering from. I can tell you that we're all committed to doing that. We're all committed to making sure that we're providing a safe food supply for the American citizens, the great people of this country. So again, thank you for everything, and I yield back. One of the things that strikes me as I listen to your testimony today and the discussion that we've had is I often say that government is always trying to fix its last solution. The federal government, through misguided laws and regulations, has created the monopolistic problems that we've talked about, the agency capture that has been raised, the regulatory burdens that have been discussed, and now we need to fix this mess. And the PRIME Act is an excellent step in that direction. Mr. Salatin, if under the PRIME Act, farmers and ranchers are able to feed their livestock for a longer period of time because they're able to sell or contract with the independent processors that we've been talking about rather than a feedlot. Do you think that there would be benefits to the consumers as well?
That's probably the most unsung story of the hearing today, is the benefits to the consumer. A, they wouldn't be subjected to only this oligarchical funnel. They would now have lots of options. So that creates a more resilient, secure food supply, a more stable food supply for shocks and, black swan events, all right? Number two, they would be able to buy small volumes instead of large volumes. So they wouldn't have to maintain either as large a freezer or as large a bank account. It would be a more democratic access to people that can't afford the large volumes. And number three, the price would come down because it doesn't have to be pushed through this very expensive capital and paperwork and regulatory intensive sieve of small plant federal inspection. And I would suggest finally that they would know more where their meat came from, and there would actually be more overall accountability within the system, from traceability, responsibility, all those kinds of things would happen because it is a smaller it's a more relational, intimate transaction rather than a nameless, faceless label on a supermarket shelf.
Well, I think that's a very good summary. And under the federal program and the federal laws and regulations that have set this up, in Wyoming we have 12 USDA meat processors and 10 state-inspected slaughter facilities. The meat that is processed under our state inspection can be bought and sold within the state, but not outside of the state. Mr. Trotter, is there any reason to believe that there is a lesser quality of meat or a less healthy meat or a less safe meat that is being produced in our state-regulated facilities?
I mean, the way the current law is set up, the state authorities, the state inspectors are held to exactly the same standards as their federal counterparts. The facilities themselves are also held to the same standards as the federal counterparts. So no, it's really up to the same standard. It is just a different agency going in and enforcing these standards. And the agency themselves are reviewed by FSIS and the USDA.
So it really comes down to just it's a different entity employing the inspector. Do you think that Congress should reform the Wholesale Meat Act?
I'm not sure I could comment quite as well as some of the other people here on that, but it's something definitely worth looking at.
Okay. Do you have any policy recommendations for the subcommittee today?
I would say that the subcommittee and Congress in general has the opportunity here to empower small businesses without actually detracting from any federal oversight. At this point, you can empower these small companies, the 1 or 2 person businesses that are throughout the nation, thousands of them, that are able and willing and ready to help empower the other small businesses, restaurants, grocers, and people in their local communities. And this is not something that necessarily should have federal inspection and federal just direct oversight day to day for very small parts of the market here. And there are ways, by essentially returning this power to the states, states can go ahead and set their own standards. And that is the purpose of state governments and just the concept of federalism as a whole.
You know, Mr. Slatton, you said something today that really resonated with me, and you used the word freedom. And that really is the foundation of our Constitution and our republic. I respect the fact and understand and appreciate your understanding of how freedom is related to the very topics that we're discussing today. All 4 of you have been wonderful witnesses. We appreciate the comments and the commentary that you have provided, the personal experiences that you have had, and why this is such an important issue, not just for you, not just for our small producers, and not just for one segment of our industries. This has to do with food supply. This has to do with the supply chain. This has to do with being able to provide affordable beef and pork and chicken and venison to the citizens of this great country. I just truly believe that one of the things that our government should be doing is we need to make sure that we are adopting policies and regulations and laws that do not increase the cost of food, housing, and energy. And your contribution today allows us to address one of those very important legs to that three-legged stool, and I appreciate it.